Maximum security federal prison, steel bars, concrete walls, 23-hour lockdowns. This is where society puts its most dangerous criminals to keep them from hurting anyone else. But what happens when those walls can't contain the violence? What happens when a man can orchestrate murder from behind bars as easily as ordering takeout? This is a story of Frank "Puppet" Martinez, a shot caller who proved that prison walls mean nothing when you control an army on the streets. Late 1990s, Frank Martinez sits in a federal cell, convicted, locked away, supposedly neutralized. But on the streets of Los Angeles, his word is still law. Every drug dealer in MacArthur Park knows his name. Every street vendor fears his tax collectors. Every member of the Columbia Lil Psychos clique waits for his orders. The 18th Street Gang isn't just another street gang. We're talking 30,000 to 50,000 members. Not hundreds, not thousands, tens of thousands, spread across the United States and Central America. Started in Los Angeles, now it's transnational, multi-ethnic, organized like a corporation, but violent like a cartel. At the bottom, you got your everyday homies, the soldiers. Above them, the veteranos who've earned their stripes through violence and time served. Then you got the toros, the bulls, the enforcers, the muscle. When someone needs to be reminded why they pay, the toros show up. But the real power, that belongs to the shot callers. And in the Columbia Lil Psychos clique, that shot caller was Frank "Puppet" Martinez. Here's what makes Martinez different. He wasn't just 18th Street, he was Mexican Mafia, La M, the organization that controls Southern California gangs from inside prison walls. When you're Mexican Mafia, you don't just run your neighborhood, you control entire cities. You tax drug dealers, you authorize hits, you decide who lives and who dies, and you do it all from a prison cell. The Columbia Lil Psychos controlled Westlake and MacArthur Park, dense, poor, perfect for hiding criminal operations in plain sight, street vendors on every corner, drug dealers in every alley, and every single one of them paying taxes to CLCS. Court documents show MacArthur Park alone was generating tens of thousands of dollars per week. Every week, $50 from this vendor, $100 from that dealer, percentages from drug sales, protection money from businesses. It all flowed upward, from the streets to the soldiers, from the soldiers to the shot callers, from the shot callers to the Mexican Mafia. And at the center of this web sat Frank Martinez, locked in federal prison since the late 90s, but more powerful than ever. Because here's what civilians don't understand about gang culture. Prison isn't punishment, it's a promotion. When you're on the streets, you're vulnerable. Rivals can get you, police can flip you, but when you're locked up, you become untouchable, mythical. Your orders carry more weight because everyone knows you're willing to do the time. Martinez had been convicted in 2002 on federal racketeering charges, multiple life sentences, no possibility of parole. The feds thought they had neutralized him. They thought wrong. From his cell, Martinez controlled every aspect of CLCS operations. Who could sell drugs and where? Which vendors paid taxes and how much? Who lived and who died? All of it decided by a man who hadn't walked free in years. But how? How do you run a criminal empire from maximum security? How do you give orders when every phone call is monitored, when every letter is read, when every visit is recorded? Enter Janie Garcia. On paper, she's just a wife visiting her husband in prison. But on the streets, they called her La Señora, the lady. Martinez's voice on the outside. Every week, she'd make the drive to federal prison, pass through metal detectors, submit to searches, sit across from her husband in a visiting room where cameras watched every move, and somehow she'd walk out with a list of people to extort, assault, or eliminate. Martinez had perfected the art of coded conversation. When he talked about collecting rent from the new tenants, he meant extorting newly arrived drug dealers. When he mentioned cleaning up the neighborhood, he meant eliminating rivals. When he said someone was sick and needed medicine, that person was marked for death. La Señora would memorize every word, every name, every instruction. Then she'd relay these orders to the CLCS leadership on the streets. She was the bridge between the prison and the pavement, but messages weren't enough. Martinez needed to move money, lots of it. Drug proceeds flowing in, payment to soldiers flowing out, lawyers to pay, commissary accounts to fill, families to support. This is where Isaac Guillen entered the picture. A licensed attorney with a legitimate practice, clean record, bar membership in good standing, the perfect criminal partner. Attorney-client privilege is sacred in America. It's constitutional. When a lawyer meets with a client, that conversation is protected. No surveillance, no recording, no monitoring. It's the one conversation in prison that's truly private. Guillen weaponized this privilege. He'd visit Martinez under the pretense of legal consultation. But instead of discussing appeals or case law, they'd discuss murder and money. Guillen would take notes like any lawyer would, except these notes weren't legal strategies. They were assassination lists, extortion targets, drug shipment schedules. Guillen became the gang's banker. Over $1.3 million in drug and extortion proceeds flowed through Guillen's accounts. $1.3 million. He'd collect cash from the streets, deposit it in attorney trust accounts, then distribute it according to Martinez's instructions. The FBI would later prove Guillen made over 60 trips to visit Martinez and other CLCS members in various prisons. 60 trips, each one moving messages, money, or both. Meanwhile, the extortion machine kept running. Every drug dealer in MacArthur Park knew the rules. You want to sell on CLCS territory? You pay taxes, usually 10 to 30% of gross sales, not profit, gross. Before you pay your supplier, before you pay your crew, the tax comes first. Street vendors had it worse. $50 here, $100 there. Doesn't sound like much until you realize there were hundreds of them. Food carts, flower sellers, DVD vendors, all paying weekly taxes just to exist. The collectors would come around like clockwork, young homies looking to prove themselves, older veteranos who'd make examples of those who didn't pay. They all carried the same message. This tax isn't optional, it's not negotiable. You pay or you pay. The FBI was watching all of this, building their case, recording phone calls, tracking money, flipping informants. They started intercepting Martinez's calls from prison. Even though inmates know calls are recorded, they get comfortable, they get sloppy. The FBI heard Martinez say fumigate. They heard him talk about collecting rent. They heard him discuss cleaning up problems. And slowly, they built their dictionary of death. Every coded word, every hidden meaning, every violent order disguised as casual conversation. September 15th, 2007, MacArthur Park. Francisco Clemente was just another street vendor trying to make a living. When the CLCS collector showed up that day, it was routine. Same kid who came every week, same demand, $50. But Clemente was tired of paying, tired of being squeezed. So he did something that would change everything. He said no. In the gang world, no isn't just defiance. It's disrespect. It's a challenge to the entire system. If one vendor stops paying, others might get ideas. The whole extortion machine could break down. Giovanni Machado got the call, 24 years old, CLCS soldier. When he heard about Clemente's refusal, he saw opportunity. This was his chance to show the homies he could handle business. Machado grabbed his gun and went hunting. He found Clemente near MacArthur Park. But Clemente wasn't alone. He was with his family, his wife, his children, his 23-day-old son, Luis Angel Garcia, 23 days old, not even a month on this earth. Any real soldier would have waited, would have caught Clemente alone. But Macedo was young, stupid, and eager to prove himself. He attacked in broad daylight. The bullets meant for Clemente hit the infant. Luis Angel Garcia died in his mother's arms. 23 days old, lost his life over a $50 extortion payment. The news exploded across Los Angeles. Every headline was another nail in CLCS's coffin. The community was outraged. The FBI moved from investigation to manhunt. The LAPD formed a task force. Everyone wanted justice. But here's the thing about the Mexican Mafia. They have rules, codes, lines you don't cross, and taking the life of children, that's the ultimate violation. It's not about morality, it's about business. Eliminating kids brings heat, federal heat, media heat, community heat, the kind of heat that shuts down operations and sends everyone to prison. When word reached Martinez in federal prison, he had a problem. Macedo's actions hadn't just violated the code, they threatened the entire CLCS operation. The Mexican Mafia was asking questions. Why did your soldier take the life of a baby? Why is our business all over the news? Martinez needed to act fast. He needed to show the Mexican Mafia that this wasn't sanctioned. And in the gang world, there's only one way to do that. Macedo had to die. The order came down through the usual channels. La Señora carried the message. Guillain confirmed the details. The word spread through CLCS leadership. Find Macedo, end Macedo. But Macedo wasn't stupid. He knew what he'd done. He knew the consequences. He went into hiding. That's when Javier Perez stepped up. Perez was a respected CLCS member, trusted, reliable. He reached out to Macedo with an offer. There was work in Mexico, good money, safe territory, a chance to lay low until the heat died down. Macedo took the bait. They crossed the border together. Perez, Macedo, and several other CLCS members. Macedo thought he was heading to safety. He was heading to his execution. They drove to a remote area outside Tijuana. That's when they turned on him. Multiple CLCS members jumped Macedo. They beat him. They attacked him until he lost consciousness. Then, believing he was dead, they threw his body off a cliff. But Macedo survived. Broken ribs, fractured skull, internal bleeding, but alive. He crawled through the desert, found help, made it to a hospital, and when he recovered, he did the unthinkable. He flipped. Giovanni Macedo became a government witness. He sat in FBI offices and named names, detailed operations, explained the hierarchy, revealed the codes, everything. Javier Perez, the one who led the mission to eliminate Macedo, got life in prison, no parole. He thought he was being a good soldier. Instead, he handed the FBI their star witness. But Martinez wasn't done cleaning house. Juan Termite Romero became the next target. Termite had been with CLCS for years, a reliable soldier. But after the baby elimination, things changed. Maybe he was having second thoughts. Maybe he was skimming money. In Martinez's world, suspicion was enough. The FBI wiretaps were rolling 24/7, agents listening for that one slip-up, that one clear order that would seal the case. Then they heard it, Martinez's voice cold and clear. Fumigate the termite, not talk to termite, not check on termite, fumigate. In Martinez's dictionary of death, that meant only one thing. Juan Termite Romero had to die. The order spread through CLCS like wildfire. Multiple members got the word. Find termite, end termite. When the shot caller speaks, soldiers obey. But Termite sensed something was wrong. Maybe it was the way people looked at him. Maybe it was the sudden invitations to meet in isolated places. He knew death was coming. The hit team made multiple attempts. Then one night, they almost got him. 3 CLCS members cornered him in an alley near MacArthur Park. Guns drawn, nowhere to run. Termite was severely wounded, but somehow survived. Crawled to a nearby store. Someone called 911. Lying in that hospital bed, tubes in his chest, machines keeping him alive, Termite decided he was done. Done with CLCS, done with Martinez, done with the life. When the FBI agents showed up at his bedside, Termite talked. He told them about the extortion operations, about the drug distribution networks, about the communication system between Martinez and the streets, about the murders he'd witnessed, everything. The FBI now had two flipped witnesses, Macedo and Termite, both marked for death by Martinez, both willing to testify. 2009, the hammer dropped. 43 members of CLCS were indicted on federal RICO charges, racketeering, murder, conspiracy, extortion, drug trafficking. The indictment read like a horror story: the murder of baby Luis Angel Garcia, the attempted murder of Macedo, the attempted murder of Termite, years of extortion, millions in drug proceeds, all traced back to orders from Frank Martinez in federal prison. But remember, Martinez himself had already been convicted back in 2002. He was already serving life. This new case was about everyone else, the soldiers who carried out his orders, the lieutenants who enforced his will. 37 of the 43 defendants were convicted. Some pleaded guilty, others went to trial and lost. The evidence was overwhelming: wiretaps, surveillance footage, financial records, and most damaging of all, testimony from Macedo and Termite. May 2012, 4 CLCS members who went to trial got their sentences: life, no parole, no hope. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom: "You murdered a 23-day-old infant over $50. You turned neighborhoods into war zones. You made decent people live in fear. Life in prison is the only appropriate sentence." December 2010, the California State Bar disbarred Guillen, stripped him of his law license. His legal career was over. January 10th, 2013, Guillen stood in federal court as the judge read his sentence: 84 months, 7 years in federal prison. The man who used attorney-client privilege to facilitate violence was about to experience prison from the other side. The evidence against Guillen was damning. Over $1.3 million in drug money laundered through his accounts, 60 visits to imprisoned CLCS members, coded messages hidden in legal documents. An FBI agent later said Guillen was more dangerous than any street soldier. He gave Martinez a voice. He gave him reach. He turned the Constitution into a weapon. The convictions created a power vacuum in MacArthur Park. Young homies started fighting over territory. Different cliques tried to claim CLCS corners. The organized system Martinez had built from his prison cell began eating itself. But CLCS didn't die. It adapted. New shot callers emerged, younger, hungrier, more reckless. They'd learned from Martinez's mistakes, use burner phones, change codes constantly, never trust anyone who's been arrested, never violate the Mexican Mafia's rules about children. 2024 reports show CLCS still operating in Los Angeles, weakened but not destroyed, still extorting, still dealing, still eliminating. The FBI cut off the head, but the body kept moving. Macedo disappeared into federal protection. New name, new life, somewhere in America. The man who took the life of an infant over $50 is living under government protection. That's the deal with the devil prosecutors make. Termite got the same deal. Both men will spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. In the gang world, snitching is the only unforgivable sin. The Mexican Mafia has a long memory and a longer reach. Frank Martinez sits in federal maximum security today, ADX Florence maybe, or Marion. What matters is he'll never walk free again. Multiple life sentences, no parole, no hope. But here's what should terrify you. Martinez wasn't unique. Right now, In prisons across America, other shot callers are giving orders. Other gangs are collecting taxes. Other corrupt lawyers are carrying messages. The system that created Martinez still exists. Think about the human cost. Baby Luis Angel Garcia, dead at 23 days old. His parents, destroyed by grief. Francisco Clemente, living with survivor's guilt. Hundreds of vendors who paid extortion for years. Entire neighborhoods held hostage by fear. Then there's the gang members themselves. 37 people convicted, dozens serving life sentences. Young men who will die behind bars for following orders from a man already in prison. Their families are victims too. Children growing up without fathers. Wives visiting prisons every weekend. Mothers crying over sons who chose the gang over everything else. Generations of trauma spreading through communities. But here's the systemic failure nobody wants to discuss. How does a man in maximum security, federal prison, control street operations? How do prison walls become meaningless? First, the prison system itself is broken, overcrowded, understaffed, corrupted. Guards making $30,000 a year are supposed to control inmates making millions from drug operations. Some guards look the other way, others actively participate. Second, the communication systems are outdated. Prisoners know their calls are recorded, but they also know nobody's listening to thousands of hours of recordings in real time. By the time law enforcement decodes the conversation, the murder's already happened. Third, attorney-client privilege is too easily weaponized. The Constitution protects these conversations for good reason. But what happens when the attorney becomes the criminal? The system has no good answer. Fourth, the gang structure is designed for this. The Mexican Mafia didn't accidentally discover that prison makes you powerful. They built their entire organization around it. Prison isn't a setback, it's the plan. The FBI and LAPD deserve credit. They spent years building this case, thousands of hours of surveillance. They decoded the language, followed the money, and dismantled a criminal empire. But they also got lucky. Macedo survived being thrown off a cliff. Termite survived being shot multiple times. Without their testimony, Martinez would still be running CLCS from his cell. 37 convictions sounds impressive until you remember that 18th Street has 30,000 members. CLCS was one click among hundreds. Martinez was one shot caller among dozens. This was a battle, not the war. Today, MacArthur Park is still gang territory. Street vendors still pay taxes. Drug dealers still claim corners. The players changed, but the game continues because the conditions that create gangs haven't changed. Poverty, lack of opportunity, broken families, failed schools, it's all still there. The prison to street pipeline keeps flowing. Young men go in as soldiers and come out as shot callers. Federal prison becomes gang university. Every conviction creates a vacancy that someone younger fills. Law enforcement learned hard lessons from this case. The old ways of fighting gangs don't work anymore. You can't just arrest your way out of the problem. The entire system needs rethinking. The FBI developed new protocols after Martinez, better monitoring of attorney visits, faster analysis of prison communications, real-time translation of coded conversations. They're using artificial intelligence now to detect patterns in prison calls. But the gangs evolved too. They've moved to encrypted messaging apps. They use video games to communicate. They speak in codes so complex that even AI struggles to decode them. It's a technological arms race. The corruption problem got worse, not better. After Guillen's conviction, other corrupt professionals got smarter. Doctors who smuggle messages during medical visits, counselors who relay orders during therapy sessions. Everyone learned from Guillen's mistakes. The real tragedy is what happens to communities like MacArthur Park. They're stuck in perpetual warfare. Regular people just trying to live become either victims or participants. There's no neutral ground in a war zone. Young kids in these neighborhoods grow up seeing two paths: work minimum wage and struggle forever, or join the gang and maybe get rich, probably get eliminated, definitely get respected. When those are your only options, the gang starts looking logical. The Martinez case exposed the myth of prison rehabilitation. What rehabilitation? Martinez went to federal prison and became more powerful. He networked with other gang leaders. He learned new techniques. Prison was his corporate headquarters. Every young gang member sees this. They see Martinez running an empire from a cell. They see the respect he commanded, and they think, that could be me. Prison becomes aspiration, not deterrent. After all the convictions, all the sentences, all the seized assets, one question remains. Did any of it matter? Martinez is in prison for life, but someone else runs CLCS now. Guillen lost his law license, but other corrupt lawyers took his place. 37 members got convicted, but 37 new members got recruited. The cycle continues. Right now, in federal prisons across America, the next Frank Martinez is giving orders. The next Isaac Guillen is carrying messages. The next Giovanni Macedo is pulling triggers. The next baby Luis Angel Garcia is in danger. We know how to fight gangs. We don't know how to end them. We can disrupt operations. We can convict members, but we can't eliminate the conditions that create gangs in the first place. So what's the solution? More prisons, longer sentences, those haven't worked, more surveillance, the gangs adapt faster than law enforcement, more social programs? Maybe, but that's a generation-long project, and the killing continues today. Maybe the answer is so radical that nobody wants to hear it. End the drug war, legalize and regulate everything, empty the prisons, rebuild the schools, create actual opportunities, make gang membership unnecessary instead of just illegal. But that's not happening, so the Frank Martinezes of the world keep winning. Even from prison, even with life sentences, they keep winning because the system that created them still exists. In the end, baby Luis Angel Garcia died for nothing. His death led to convictions, but not change, justice, but not peace, punishment, but not prevention. 23 days of life ended by a system that nobody knows how to stop. And somewhere in federal maximum security, Frank Puppet Martinez sits in his cell, no longer giving orders, no longer running CLCS, but probably not regretting much either. In his world, he won. He rose to the top. He commanded respect. That's the real horror of this story. Not that Martinez failed, but that by gang standards, he succeeded. And right now, thousands of young men want to follow his path, want to become the next prison puppet master. The cycle continues. The violence continues. The system continues, and nobody knows how to stop it.